15 years can be destroyed in just 15 seconds. It took me exactly that long to realize my marriage was falling apart when I noticed the different smile on Sarah's face as she looked at her phone. That wasn't her usual smile. It was the kind of expression she used to have at the beginning of our relationship, when it was just the two of us against the world. That night, I watched my wife on the other side of the room, completely absorbed in her glowing screen, and felt a tightness in my chest that I couldn't explain yet. The same woman who used to bombard me with messages during the day was now barely looking up when I got home. The Sarah I knew, who made sure to share every moment of her day with me, was slowly turning into a stranger living under the same roof. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get access to more stories like this. Our marriage was always considered an example among our friends. Sarah and I met in college, and from then on, we built a life that seemed straight out of a romance movie. Unforgettable trips, family dinners, lazy weekends, and ambitious plans for the future. She was my best friend, my confidant, and my partner in every decision. Our routine was comfortable and predictable, just the way we liked it. Every morning, we made coffee together before work. On Fridays, we had our traditional movie night with Japanese food. On weekends, we alternated between visiting our parents and hanging out with friends. We built a life that seemed unshakable. Sarah was always a warm and expressive person. She made it a point to show her love with small gestures, notes in my lunchbox, random messages during the day just to say she missed me, surprise hugs while I was washing the dishes. It was the kind of relationship that made everyone around us sigh with envy. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, things started to change. The notes in my lunchbox stopped appearing. The messages during the day became fewer and more automated. The spontaneous hugs were replaced by a quick goodbye kiss. At first, I chalked up these changes to work stress or just the natural settling down of a long marriage. After all, wasn't it normal for the intensity to fade over time? I tried to make up for it by being more present, more attentive. I started making special dinners, suggesting different plans, planning surprises. But every attempt of mine seemed to be met with a polite, distant smile, as if Sarah was physically there, but her mind was drifting to places I couldn't reach. The first real time I felt something was off was on a Friday night. Sarah, who always insisted on our traditional movie night, said she needed to answer some work emails. I sat alone on the couch, with our Japanese food cooling on the coffee table, while I heard her low laughter coming from the office. The changes became more obvious in the following weeks. She started taking her phone to the bathroom, a thing she had never done before. Whenever I walked into a room, she'd quickly lock her screen or switch apps. On the rare occasions she left the phone unlocked, I noticed that she had changed the settings so that notifications wouldn't show on the lock screen. During a dinner with friends, I saw how she was constantly checking her phone under the table, discreetly smiling at the screen. When Mike, our longtime friend, asked if everything was okay at work, she replied with a hasty, "Yeah," and tucked her phone back in her purse, as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. At home, Sarah started locking herself in the office for online meetings that went late into the night. Sometimes, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and find her whispering on the phone on the balcony. When I questioned her, she said they were just work issues that needed to be sorted out with international client time zones. Her behavior with our friends changed too. She began turning down invitations to social events, especially ones where we'd be together. When I asked about a birthday party, she decided not to attend. Her response was vague. "I need some time for myself." Our moments of intimacy, which were already becoming rare, practically disappeared. Her goodnight kisses were quick and distant. Whenever I tried to start a more in-depth conversation about our relationship, she would change the subject or say she was too tired to talk. It was on a Wednesday night that Sarah finally said the words I'd been most afraid to hear. "Michael, I need space to think," she said, unable to look me in the eyes. I sat on the edge of our bed, the same one we picked out together years ago, trying to process what that really meant. She suggested that I spend a few days at my parents' place, claiming she needed some time alone to organize her thoughts. It was surreal hearing those words from the same person who used to say she couldn't sleep properly when I was away on work trips. That night, while she was packing a small bag, I noticed she'd left her phone on the nightstand. A notification flashed on the screen. James sent a message. The name wasn't unfamiliar. It was her high school boyfriend, the one she always described as her first true love. I was never the jealous or controlling type, but something inside me said I needed to know the truth. When Sarah went to take a shower, I unlocked her phone. The password was still the same since we got married. The messages were all there, hundreds of them, exchanged over the last several months. I found out that they had reconnected through Facebook. What started as a simple exchange of messages reminiscing about school days had evolved into daily conversations, photos, and secrets. Sarah was sharing with him her insecurities about our marriage, details of our intimate life, and doubts about her feelings. James, newly divorced, fueled those doubts with nostalgic messages and hints. I never forgot our last kiss at the prom. I always wondered what it would be like if we'd stayed together. You're still as beautiful as you were back then. I went back to the bedroom and placed her phone exactly where it was. Sarah got out of the shower, gave me a mechanical goodnight kiss, and turned away. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how 15 years of history could be questioned because of teenaged idealized memories and text messages. That night, I made a decision that would completely change the course of our story, but not in the way Sarah expected. Instead of confronting Sarah or begging for her attention, I decided to do something completely different. The next morning, I quietly packed my things and left the house before she woke up, leaving only a simple note. I got your request for space. I'm going to respect that. On the drive to my parents' place, a sense of clarity took over me. Why should I fight for someone who was clearly investing emotional energy in someone else? Years of dedication to our marriage had turned into mere convenience for Sarah, while she relived her teenage fantasies with James. That same day, I did something I'd never done before. I booked an appointment with a therapist. Not to try to save my marriage, but to understand why I was willing to settle for less than I deserved. During my sessions, I realized how much I had let my identity dissolve into being Sarah's husband. I started to rediscover old interests that I had abandoned. I went back to running, a hobby I had given up because Sarah always complained about the time it took. I reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in years, people who always brought positive energy into my life. I invested in myself like I hadn't in a long time. I updated my wardrobe, swapping out the plain, comfortable clothes for pieces that made me feel good. I went back to the gym, not to impress anyone, but because I wanted to feel stronger and healthier. In the first few weeks, Sarah sent casual messages, asking how I was. I replied politely but kept the conversations short and to the point. When she hinted that maybe I could come back home so we could talk, I said I still needed time, using her own words against her. I created new habits and routines. I joined a book club, something I'd always wanted to do. I started cooking for myself, experimenting with recipes that Sarah had never been interested in. On weekends, I explored parts of the city I'd never visited, taking photos and sharing them on my social media, which also got a new life. The most interesting part was seeing how the people around me reacted to the changes. Coworkers commented on how I seemed lighter and more confident. Old friends said I'd gotten back to being myself. Even my parents, who were initially worried about the separation, noticed a different energy in me. A coworker, Jennifer, started inviting me out to lunch. There was no romantic intent at first. She was also going through a divorce, and our conversations were more about personal growth and self-improvement. But her friendship helped me realize that there was a world of possibilities beyond my marriage. Meanwhile, through mutual friends, I learned that Sarah was confused by my reaction. She expected me to beg to come back, to show how much I was suffering without her. Instead, I was appearing on social media as a new Michael, a guy who seemed happier and more fulfilled without her. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but every small step moved me further away from that old version of myself, the one who would accept any crumb of attention from Sarah. I was becoming someone I admired, and that was worth more than any relationship. 3 months passed since I left home, and the changes in my life were obvious to anyone who knew me. My workout routine was already showing results. I'd lost 15 kilos and muscle gains were starting to show. My posture changed. I walked taller, with more confidence. At work, my productivity increased significantly. Without constantly worrying about the marriage, I could focus on projects I'd put on hold. I received a promotion I'd longed for, and with it came a considerable salary boost. I started investing that extra money in myself, specialization courses, photography classes, and even a few sessions with a personal stylist. It was at one of those shopping sessions that I ran into Amanda, an old friend of Sarah's. Her surprised look when she saw me was priceless. "Michael, I barely recognized you," she exclaimed, checking out my new look. We talked for a few minutes, and I could tell how impressed she was with the changes. Later, I found out she had told all the girls about our encounter. Sarah's social circle had always been tight-knit, and soon stories about my transformation started circulating. Lauren, her best friend, reached out for coffee, supposedly to check on me. During our talk, She let slip that Sarah was following my changes on social media and wasn't handling it well. The photos I posted of my new activities created quite a buzz. One in particular, where I appeared at a company event next to Jennifer, stirred something special. There was nothing more than friendship between us, but the image of me, smiling, well-dressed, next to an attractive woman, seemed to hit a nerve. Sarah began to make more direct attempts at contact, messages asking if I'd like dinner to sort things out, long emails reminiscing about special moments from our marriage. Even a bouquet of flowers arrived at my work with a card apologizing. But something had changed inside of me. Every time her name popped up on my phone, I didn't feel that same urgency to reply. The memories she was trying to revive no longer held the same power over me. It was like watching an old movie. You know the scenes, but you no longer feel the same thrill. At a happy hour with coworkers, one of the new interns openly flirted with me. Years ago, that would have made me uncomfortable and guilty. Now, even though I wasn't interested, I handled the situation with ease and humor. I realized I had not only regained my physical appearance, but more importantly, my self-esteem. The most surprising thing was when my sister mentioned that Sarah had started going to the same gym as me, at the same time I usually went. It was obvious that this wasn't a coincidence, but instead of changing my schedule to avoid her, I kept my routine. On the days we crossed paths, I politely greeted her and continued my workout. Her presence no longer affected my emotional balance. The transformation that started as a reaction to our marital crisis had become something much bigger. It was a rediscovery of myself, a journey of self-knowledge and personal appreciation with no turning back. 6 months after our separation, the inevitable confrontation happened. Sarah waited for me after one of my gym sessions. She looked more put together than usual, wearing the perfume I used to like. "We need to talk," she said, in that tone she always used when she wanted something. I agreed to have coffee, more out of politeness than interest. We sat in a nearby cafe, and for the first time in our marriage, I realized I was in control of my emotions. Sarah started by saying she'd cut off all contact with James, that she realized she was living a meaningless teenage fantasy. "I miss you," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "Our home feels empty without you. I now see how much you did for us, how attentive and present you were." She went on about how proud she was of the changes I had made, how I looked more attractive and confident than ever. In the past, those words would have deeply moved me. But now, sitting there and watching her attempt at emotional manipulation, I felt only a slight sadness. Not sadness for the end of our marriage, but for realizing how long I had let my happiness depend on her approval. Sarah tried to take my hand on the table. "We can start over," she suggested. "I'm willing to do couples therapy, change my work hours, do whatever it takes." Her voice trembled when she mentioned she'd seen my photos with Jennifer, admitting she'd felt jealous. Calmly, I explained that her insecurities about Jennifer were unfounded. We were just friends. But I also made it clear that her opinions about my friendships no longer mattered in my life. "The problem isn't James," I said. "The problem is that you only valued what we had once you realized you could lose me." She began to cry, drawing looks from nearby tables. She tried arguing that 15 years of history couldn't just end like this, that we'd built too much together to throw it away. That's when I realized she still hadn't understood. I'm not the one who threw away our history. "Sarah," I said, keeping my tone firm yet gentle, "you didn't ask for space to think about our marriage. You asked for space to explore possibilities with someone else. That's the important difference." I got up, leaving a few dollars on the table to cover our coffees. "I sincerely hope you find your happiness," I said, "but it won't be with me. Not anymore." As I walked home, I received several messages from her. Please, promises to change, thinly veiled threats about telling your version to our friends. I didn't reply to any. That night, for the first time since we separated, I went to sleep without a shred of doubt about my decision. The next day, I sent an email to my lawyer, asking to start the divorce proceedings. It was time to officially end a story that, in truth, had already ended months ago, when Sarah chose to chase old memories rather than find what was missing in our present. The following months were intense. Sarah swung between attempts at reconciliation and moments of hostility. Through mutual friends, I learned that she had fallen into depression and started therapy. Part of me worried about her well-being, but now I managed to keep a healthy distance. During the divorce process, I maintained my firm stance. When she tried to use our belongings as bargaining chips, I agreed to virtually all her demands. The house, the furniture, Even the car I loved so much. None of that mattered anymore. My emotional freedom was worth far more than material things. During this time, my friendship with Jennifer grew stronger. She helped me find a new apartment, introduced me to her circle of friends, and encouraged me to try new things. We started hiking together on weekends, an activity Sarah always refused, thinking it was too tiring. On one of those hikes, Jennifer admitted she was developing feelings for me. She was honest in saying she'd understand if I wasn't ready for a new relationship. Her emotional maturity impressed me. It was refreshing to be with someone who communicated clearly and directly. I decided to be just as honest with her. I explained that I was still processing the end of my marriage and needed time. Jennifer completely understood, saying that our friendship was more important than any romantic possibility. That conversation only increased my respect for her. Sarah found out about this closeness with Jennifer through social media. She started spreading stories among our mutual friends that I'd had an affair during our marriage. Some initially believed her, but my behavior throughout the process spoke louder. The people who really mattered knew the truth. At work, I received an offer to lead a new project in another state. Before, I would have immediately turned it down, thinking first about the marriage. Now, I saw it as an opportunity for a complete fresh start. When I told Jennifer about the offer, she smiled and said, "It's going to be amazing for your career. You should take it." Sarah's reaction to the news about my possible move was dramatic. She showed up at my work unannounced, creating a scene in the lobby. "You're destroying everything we built!" she shouted, while security tried to calm her down. It was sad to see the person I once loved so deeply lose control like that. That night, sitting in my new apartment, I reflected on how people can change when they lose what they took for granted. Sarah, who once asked for space and time away from me, now couldn't stand the idea of me leaving. It confirmed that I'd made the right decision. Jennifer brought me a pizza, and we ended up spending the night talking about the future. Not as a couple, but as two people who genuinely care about each other. For the first time in a long while, I felt I was exactly where I should be. Free, at peace, and open to the possibilities life offered. The divorce would be finalized in a few weeks, and the move to another state was nearly confirmed. A new chapter was beginning, and this time, it would be on my own terms. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Tuesday. I signed the final papers with a sense of relief and closure. Sarah didn't show up at the final hearing. She only sent her lawyer. I later found out she had started dating someone new. Ironically, not James. Taking the job in another state turned out to be the right call. The company offered a generous relocation package, and I found a perfect apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Jennifer helped me with the move, and in the last few weeks I was still in town. Our relationship naturally evolved into something more. It wasn't planned or forced. It happened during a farewell dinner she organized. Looking at her from across the table, I realized I was ready to move on. Our first kiss was simple, natural, without the burden of expectations or comparisons with the past. We decided to try a long-distance relationship. Jennifer had her own established life in the city, and I needed this change to really start over. We agreed to see each other once a month, alternating visits between our cities. On moving day, I received one last message from Sarah. It was different from the others. No drama, no demands. She just wished me happiness and apologized for her mistakes. I replied sincerely, thanking her for the good years we had, and wishing her peace too. I drove to my new home with a playlist Jennifer had put together for the trip. With every kilometer left behind, I felt the weight of the past few months fade away. There was no bitterness or regret, just the certainty that sometimes you need to lose something to gain something better. My new work colleagues welcomed me warmly. The project I had come to lead was challenging and exciting. On weekends when Jennifer wasn't visiting, I explored the city, made new friends, and continued investing in my personal growth. Life had taught me an important lesson. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a much better one. 1 year has passed since I signed the divorce papers. Looking back, I realized that Sarah's request for space was the best gift I could ever have received. Sometimes, you have to lose something you thought was essential to discover your true strength. Jennifer and I are still together, building a relationship based on mutual respect and honest communication. The distance, which many saw as an obstacle, helped us create a deeper connection. We learned to cherish every moment together without taking each other for granted. I heard from mutual friends that Sarah eventually moved to another city. James, the high school ex, ended up reconciling with his ex-wife. It's funny how life has its own way of putting things into perspective. My personal transformation continued. It wasn't just about physical appearance or professional achievements anymore. It was about maintaining a healthy balance in every area of my life. I learned that self-love isn't selfish. It's the necessary foundation for any healthy relationship. For anyone going through something similar, here's a word of advice. When someone asks for space, give yourself that same space to grow. Don't beg for attention or try to prove your worth. Your value isn't defined by someone else's validation. True happiness isn't about trying to salvage a relationship that's already over. It's about having the courage to start a new chapter. Sometimes, the end of one story is exactly what you need to write a much better one. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get access to more stories like this.